So this would be Monday night before Thanksgiving, and my son's sitting on the bed with me, and he's saying, "Mommy, how come Daddy's leaving us for no reason at all?" Don't ever think that you're too good, that you can't get left, okay? Don't think that you're so pretty, that you're so fine, that your bank account is so fat, that your portfolio is so amazing, that someone is not going to drop you in the dust. Because you know what? You can get left no matter who you are. You have the human condition just like anybody else. So don't make the mistake of thinking that you're all that. And even if you don't think that you're all that, you can still get left behind no matter what you do for someone, no matter what you sacrifice for someone. They will screw you over if that's the type of person that they are. You see, it was just a few days ago now, almost 4 days ago now, that my son's father decided to leave us the day before Thanksgiving. And I guess my first clue that he didn't really intend on taking us with him was a few weeks prior. I had went to go give him a kiss, and he put his hands behind his back and leaned his body forward, and then he just kissed me like how a little girl and a little boy would kiss each other. And that was how I found out. That was the indicator that let me know that he had gotten his workers' compensation money and that he was going to leave us. He didn't want to spend any more of his not hard-earned workers' compensation settlement on us. He didn't want to give me one more dime, not even for our son. Property taxes are due in 10 days, $1,300 in other bills. All he cared about was himself and going to all-you-can-eat sushi and pumping up steroids and weights with his buddies and just living the life of a single man with no responsibilities. And the sad thing is that I've done nothing but be here for this person, my son's father. In fact, the only reason he's not in prison right now is because I helped him avoid it. He decided that he liked doing meth and Adderall and drinking alcohol, and he wanted to go and party. And so his grandmother got him a little apartment here about a mile from my house, and she paid for the first couple of months of rent, and then after the couple of months of rent was over, and the girl who he had let move in with him, the other meth addict, she decided she wasn't going to pay anything. So she packed up and left, and that gave him about 3 to 4 weeks to get out and find a new place because he didn't want to spend his money paying the rent either. Because at the time, he was getting workers' compensation checks. Now, he finally got the big one the other day. So, instead of being responsible and keeping the apartment, he decided to move out of the apartment. And in the meantime, on the last day that he was going to pretty much be in the apartment, he was going to be homeless the next day after that. And he took my son for a visit for the day. He was supposed to be back by 9:30 or 9 that night, and he wasn't back. And I called and, asked where they were, and he's like, "Oh, well, I'm not bringing him home." Because my daughter, the day before this, had chastised my son, and she had gotten a plastic spoon and attempted to, swat at him because he's very wily and very disobedient, and I was taking a nap and had no idea any of this happened. So lo and behold, there ended up being a small bruise. It wasn't really a bruise. It was, but it wasn't like something super major. Anyway, he tried getting my daughter in trouble. He tried getting me arrested. He tried getting my son taken away from me. Mind you, the sheriffs in this town already know that he has a bad drug problem. He's admitted it, and I've told him. I've told the police also. And so anyway, I mistakenly let him take our son for the day, and he decided not to bring him back based on this mark on his back. And later I found out that my daughter was being charged with child abuse, and there was no abuse. Kids play much harder on the playground and suffer way worse, but he needed a way to get what he wanted, and what he needed was assistance because he was going to be homeless. His dad was done with him. His dad hadn't talked to him in a long time. His grandmother had already given him the money, as I mentioned, and there was basically no other people that he could use at the time besides our son. So he decided to keep our son from me. He also attempted to gain temporary emergency custody, but I guess the court decided that he wasn't even fit enough to be a temporary parent. So that was denied. We had to go to court. But before we had the court date, his mother perjured herself and lied on some paperwork so that my son could go to a school near her house, not too far away from the homeless motel that my son and his dad were staying at. Because you see, he needed my son in order to hurry up and get those homeless benefits. He would have eventually gotten them, but because he had a child in care, he got them much quicker, and he was able to get into one of these transitional houses, getting food stamps and free housing, free schooling, free money. Everything was free for him. Well, in the meantime, while he enrolled my son at this school that my son is not supposed to be enrolled in, someone decided that they didn't like the way that he was handling our son and called the police on him. So this particular day this happened, he had taken our son home to his grandmother's for a little rest, and when he brought him back to the school, RPD was waiting for him. And they took him in to jail on $50,000 bail, child abuse charge. So he had to pay $5,000 to get out of jail. Now, the thing is I didn't know any of this because he had had our son for about 3 weeks. And so now it's mid-August. It's actually past mid-August because school had already started. And him and I weren't really on talking terms, so he called, and I finally answered the phone after about 3 phone calls. And he's crying and sniveling and sniffing and telling me how sorry he is. For about a good 10 minutes, I want to say, he hemmed and hawed. I had no idea what was going on. And then finally I said, so what is it exactly that you want to tell me? And then he proceeded to tell me that he had been arrested for child abuse and that he had just bailed himself out of jail for $5,000. Now, mind you, he was getting food stamps and was living in a homeless transitional house, but he had a lot of credit, so that was how he ended up being able to bail himself out of jail so quickly. I mean, he's never had any money to give me like that, but, he gave it to Shasta County. That was fine. So anyway, that was the beginning of why my son almost got taken away from us. So this was probably, I believe, the 3rd time that the police had been involved in our affairs, and within like a matter of months. It was not that long. Maybe like the 4th or 5th time, because prior to that, he had attempted to take our son. I called it kidnapping, but because neither of us had legal custody at the time, they didn't consider it kidnapping. I now have sole physical custody because after he almost got our son taken away, that was really the only way that we could gain our son without having him in the Child Protective Services system. So I was granted sole physical custody because if we hadn't settled it that day, we were going to have to go back to court, and neither of us wanted to do that, and I would have wrung his neck if my son had been taken away from me. The other interesting thing is that he lied about me, because you might be wondering, well, why didn't they call you when he was arrested? because I wondered the same thing. Well, apparently he had told them all these lies about me, what an unfit parent I am, and a bunch of other things I don't even know, because the lady never really got into it with me. She just told me that he was convincing and telling them that, I wasn't a good parent, and that was why my son was with him. And that's a total lie. My son wasn't with him because I wasn't a good parent. My son was with him because he had refused to give our son back. And I wasn't going to use our son like, a pawn. I'd already been to court for 12 years with my other eldest child, who is now in her 30s. So I had absolutely no desire to go back to court for anything like that. But I was forced to go. And so that's how everything ended up being the way that it was. And he decided to be the one to use our son. And now that, the better part of a year and a half has gone by, and he has gotten off on the misdemeanor, gotten his check from workers' compensation, mind you, which he split and put some of it into a cashier's check, which was my idea. But that was because I didn't think it was that safe for him to just have all that money in the bank. But also, what it did is it kept his first baby's mama, who he owes upwards of, $30,000 in child support to, at least at the time. It kept her from getting paid. And he paid just enough in the last couple of years to keep his driver license from getting suspended, because here the license that he has here is suspended, and that's because he got a felony hit and run DUI. So anyways, I don't know if it's called a felony, but I think it is. But anyway, it was a hit and run DUI, and that was back in 2020 when we had first gotten back here to take care of my mother. And that's not even the really sad part. The really sad part about this whole story is that on the way out on Wednesday, the day before Thanksgiving, he didn't even have the cojones to give our son a hug. A couple of days prior to that, he tried to make up excuses of why he couldn't take our son, because our son kept saying, "Mommy, how come Daddy's leaving us for no reason at all?" And I didn't want to answer that, because he wasn't leaving for no reason at all. But to a child, they don't understand. And so he heard my son asking me this, and he says, "Oh, well, your mother won't let you take me." And I says, "You know what?" I said, "Why can't you just tell him that you effed up? You're the one who did all of this. So he's the one who called the cops on me at least 3 times in 2023. And this was during his meth and Adderall use. And he tried to get me to be the one to be arrested. Not because I had done anything, just because he, had lost his mind, because that's what those types of drugs do, apparently. And he was the one who ended up getting arrested and getting in trouble for the very same thing that he was trying to ruin my life with. So, being vindictive and trying to ruin someone's life like that, it totally didn't pay off. Now he has a record. He was $5,000 more in debt. And after we went to court, I let him move back in, because him and his father are really close. What the heck were you doing? And that's why, though, because my son and his father have a really close bond, but not so close that my son is stupid. He knows, which side of the bread is buttered, so to speak. And for the last, I want to say 3 years, his dad had tried to con him into not liking me or my daughter. He tried to con him into not listening to us, telling his son that, I'm the one who's here for you. I'm the one who does everything for you. Nobody loves you the way I do. And he would constantly say these things to my son in front of us. So I guess he thought that eventually that my son was just going to fall for that because that's what he was doing. But my son didn't fall for it. And I don't play the con game. It's like, if a child wants to go, they want to go. In this case, I had custody, so there was no question about it. But at the same time, I didn't have to convince my son of anything. I didn't have to say not one thing about his dad, but his dad was still trying to convince our son that it was somehow my fault that he wasn't able to go with his dad. And he also asked, well, why isn't Daddy taking us with him? And his dad doesn't want to take us with him because he doesn't want to have to pay for us. He wants all of his money for himself, which is exactly why he avoided paying child support to his other baby's mom, who their daughter is now 17 and, going on 17 and a half at the turn of the year. And he hasn't helped her out either. But yeah, that's the new situation. That is the new era. This is me starting over again, just a few days away from being 50 years old and taking care of another child on my own with a man who is very selfish and very self-centered, narcissistic, can't stand hearing the truth from anyone about anything that has to do with himself. Now, he did have to contact CPS the next day after he got arrested and was bailed out. He did have to contact them because he had to tell them that everything that he had told them about me was an absolute lie. So you can imagine what Child Protective Services is thinking. Maybe both of us were trying to pull a fast one, and it's totally not like that at all. It was him and his wretched mother that were the ones that were pulling a fast one. So he leaves on Wednesday around 11:30 in the morning after he had gotten his truck all loaded up. And like I said, he didn't leave me with any money for anything because, he's going to go ahead and go move to Las Vegas and hang out with all of his homies, who are still single, by the way. And he's going to go and hang out with them. And a few days before Thanksgiving, the week before, he had taken me out to lunch, and I asked him, what his plans were, because I honestly thought he was going to wait for, our son's school year to be over, but then he decided that he was going to go and work at a pizza parlor at one of his buddy's, places. His buddy owns a pizza parlor over there in Las Vegas. So he was going to go over there and work there, and then he said that he was going to get, a 4-bedroom house with one of his homies. And that was pretty much when I shut down. Didn't leave any money for Christmas gifts. Just didn't care. It was just like, oh, it's all about me, I've been there through all of it. I can't even tell you how many times that this man has walked out on us, leaving me at home with his daughter, my daughter, and our newborn son. This is some years back when we first got together and we were living in Las Vegas as a family. That he just got mad and decided to take off and be gone for a couple of hours. Sometimes, he did meth. Sometimes he would go and get so drunk that, he just barely made it back home. But I'm the bad one.